Hey guys, what's going on? So I just wanted to follow up on my TV grades and I wanted to do the same thing for all of the Star Wars movies. So we're just going to go through one by one and I'll give a quick little grade out of 10 with a brief explanation as to why. So let's go ahead and get started. So starting off, we have Solo, a Star Wars story. I don't mind Solo as a movie. I think what really hurt the film was its timing. It came out right after The Last Jedi. And I think another big criticism is that it simply didn't have Harrison Ford playing Han Solo. So I think those two things really tear it apart. It was neat to see Kira and Maul in the end. I think some of the adventures in the movie were neat, but it just kind of falls flat for me, and there just isn't really a whole lot that adds to the Star Wars storyline. So I don't really think it was a necessary project, and that's why I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. Next up would be The Last Jedi. I actually didn't mind seeing this movie either in theaters when it first came out, but it's pretty safe to say by now that the story was hijacked. It went kind of all over the place, and I think Luke Skywalker should have been very different. I think Snoke should have been very different. There should have been some time spent developing Snoke, giving him a proper backstory, giving him an interesting origin. I think the same thing with Rey. I think Rey should have had a better backstory. So I would give The Last Jedi a 6.1 out of 10 just because the cinematography was really neat and it was a fun, anticipated movie. Next up, with a pretty similar score, I would give The Rise of Skywalker a 6.2. I think it was a little bit better than The Last Jedi, but again, it seemed like it just took The Last Jedi and flipped it on its head, gave us a better Rey story, brought in Palpatine, which I thought was totally unnecessary and totally undermines Return of the Jedi. And then Rey just immediately beats Palpatine at the end, which doesn't make any sense. Next up, I would have The Force Awakens. I would give The Force Awakens a 7 out of 10. I thought it was a really neat film. It was neat because it was the first Star Wars movie that had come out in probably like 10 or 15 years. And not just because of that, I think the movie does a pretty good job in setting up what could be a potential sequel trilogy. I think the Rey mystery box was neat. Snoke mystery box was neat, and that answered all of the questions with who Kylo Ren was right away. So it's kind of a neat hybrid there. And I think the film holds on its own very well. There's a few things that are a little bit weird, a little bit of a copycat of A New Hope, but it's not a major drawback of the film. So I think a 7 out of 10 is a fair rating for this film. Next, I would have Rogue One. I think Rogue One is an excellent movie. I think it's really neat how it ties in A New Hope and the plans for the Death Star. I think Jyn Erso is a really neat character. I think Andor is a really neat character that now has his own TV show. Some of the other side characters are neat as well, and I think the movie does a really good job tying in both Vader and the Empire with a complete new storyline and new characters. So it's a fun movie. I would give it a 7.5 out of 10. It is a little slow in some part, but overall an enjoyable film. Next, I would have Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. I would give this a 8 out of 10. I think it was a really good middle ground in the prequels. I think it was a little bit slow at some parts, a little bit too much talking, and it looked a little bit goofy with some of the CGI, but I think it does a really good job setting up the Clone Wars, setting up the Jango Fett and Boba Fett storylines. And it's really neat to see Anakin in more of his teenage years and his relationship with Padme. So I think this is a really excellent film. It just obviously isn't as good as some of the others on the list, which is why it's more in the middle. And corresponding with that, I would put The Phantom Menace next. I'm probably one of the only people that would rank this above Attack of the Clones, but I am personally biased because this was the first Star Wars movie I ever saw. I really enjoyed Darth Maul. I really enjoyed the Duel of the Fates sequence at the end of the film, and I thought it was really neat how it sets up both the Tread Federation, kind of what's going on politically, along with introducing Anakin Skywalker into the story. I enjoyed the pod racing scenes, and I really enjoy Qui-Gon Jinn's character, so that's why I'm giving The Phantom Menace an 8.5 out of 10. Next up would be A New Hope. I think especially for the time it came out, this movie was something else, and it was a really special movie for me to see for the first time on TV. I think it is a little bit goofy in a lot of places. It looks goofy, especially seeing it like 50 years later, but A New Hope is just a really classic movie. It's really the birthplace of Star Wars, so that's why I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. And next up, I would put Revenge of the Sith, and I would give Revenge of the Sith a 9.4 out of 10. I think what really separates Revenge of the Sith from some of the other Star Wars films is that even though it's a very dark, evil, and depressing movie, it really provides balance to the 6 films, and you can't have light without dark. So I think even though the third installment is really kind of a deep place for Star Wars, I think again you kind of had to get to this place in order to see how the galaxy eventually heals and comes out of it with the rise of the rebellion. Also really neat to see kind of how, from a political standpoint, how everything goes wrong, how Palpatine takes over, how the Jedi kind of get outcasted, and there's really only Yoda, Obi-Wan, Anakin's not really left, it's Vader, and Luke and Leia that really come out of this horrific scene of events. So I think in that sense, it really does well in giving more backstory from what we saw in 4, 5, and 6, and I think it adds a lot of layers to the original trilogy with what it did here. At number 2, I would have The Empire Strikes Back. No, this isn't number 1, but it's just my personal preference. I think what makes Empire Strikes Back so special is that this was kind of the make or break for Star Wars as a franchise. If you have a second movie that flopped, I don't know if Star Wars would really be the IP it is today. And not only did it hit a home run, it knocked the ball out of the park. Empire Strikes Back was even bigger than A New Hope. It took everything to the next level and was a better overall film in every dimension. And last but not least is Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi may not be the most peer-reviewed, highly rated Star Wars film. It's definitely up there, but for me personally, this has always been my favorite movie. I enjoyed seeing Luke's arc come to an end, and I enjoyed seeing Anakin or Vader's arc come to an end. I think the fight scenes between Luke and Vader are some of the best, some of the most inspiring, and how not only Luke refuses to turn to the dark side, but also gets his father to come back to the light is really something special. Again, another major movie in the Star Wars trilogy, and I think it also is responsible for carrying the IP to what it is today, and the ending is very spectacular. You have the Force Ghosts, you have the Ewok, you have the soundtrack, just a really beautiful movie all around, and I could watch this 10 times a year and still get the same excitement in every single scene. I would give this a 10 out of 10, and I think I forgot to rate Empire Strikes Back, but I'm giving that a 9.9 out of 10, and I appreciate you watching. May the Force be with you, and I will see you later. Bye.